We welcome you back for this next in our series of presentations on Islam, and a special welcome to our friends from the Muslim Educational Trust who have helped us and provided speakers for this series. We will have a wonderful series today and next Sunday, at which point we will conclude and find out what has been planted in our hearts through this remarkable series of presentations. For now, we'll invite our speaker to come forward to introduce our guest speakers today. Please welcome.
I greet you with the greet of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace be upon you. It's really an honor to introduce my dear mentor and sister, Nadira Najieb. Even though I just came back from Saudi Arabia and Rania put me in the spot. I was in the Hajj season, the pilgrimage to Mecca. And Rania asked me to introduce. She said, nobody knows Nadira as you do. And definitely I know Nadira. I know that Nadira the inside and Nadira the outside, Nadira the leader in our community. Sister Nadira, we met, me and her, when I was here, when I just arrived from Yemen for my schooling. 1 week later, I met Sister Nadira in her home. Another dear sister was Maryam Dawan and Sister Aisha and Brother Wesley Salahuddin. Both were, the 3 or 4 of them were involved in education and educating the community. And that was in my mind, how to get engaged the Muslim community with different ethnicities and different backgrounds to come to a common goal. The common goal that Islam has produced a great civilizations in Baghdad, in Cairo, in Andalusia, southern Spain, and so many other places. Nadira has been really one of my great mentors, one of 5 mentors that have really mentored me in this city. She has been a wonderful lady, and she was the first principal for our Islamic school of MET when we started it in 1997. Nadira is married to a great leader, another great mentor of ours, Imam Najieb. Imam Najieb, would you please stand up? Imam is the resident Imam of the Muslim Community Center of Portland. Both met about 43 years ago in California. 43 years of beautiful marriage with all its beauty. Nadira was attending law school when she met Brother Muhammad in California. And Muhammad was at that time a captain with the Nation of Islam. And he struggled and struggled until he surrendered to God the Almighty and he joined mainstream Islam. And he became one of the instrumental in founding the American Muslim identity in the Northwest. Sister Nadira has involved with so many educational projects within the city of Portland. Last but not least, she is a great grandmother and she enjoys this title. Please welcome me, Nadira Najieb, for a great engaging morning. Thank you very much, Sister Nadira.
Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be unto you. For those who don't know, I want to thank you, first of all, for coming, for taking part in listening and becoming more aware of the things that we need to know, not only worldwide, but about each other. I'm going to use some different terms. I don't want you to be frightened. I don't want you to run out. I want you to stay put and give me an opportunity just to say we have more in common than we have in differences. The first thing I'm going to say is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which means, basically, in the name of a God, the beneficent, the merciful. Whether we accept or agree on what that might look like, I always come hoping to represent you, me, the people of God, whether we want to accept that or not. I come in His name. Any errors I make are mine. Only God is perfect. That's my belief. And guess what? That's why this is so wonderful. Because my topic is human rights and women in the Quran. Human rights. We have just exercised one of our human rights. After we decided that we were humans, if you ever go look in the dictionary just under the word human, you'll be surprised there's hardly any kind of definition. Human, part of a species of Homo sapiens. I was like, no wonder we have a hard time trying to get along. I was taught when I was in school, you don't define a word by itself. A human is a human, humane, and rights. What is due us? So we have come together, hopefully, identifying ourselves as human beings, I would say creatures of Allah, of God. All right? We have come together and we have agreed as part of our human rights that we can come together to what? Assemble. So we're exercising one of the human rights that we all agree on. Another human right that we have agreed upon is our right to free expression. How about that? To be able to express our thoughts and share them with others, whether they agree or not. It's amazing to me, I don't know about you, but here we are in 2012, and we're still working on human rights. We're still talking about what our rights are as humans and what other people's rights are as humans. To me, it seems that it should be synonymous. We're all Allah's creation, God's creation. We all are humans, and we have to be careful too, because oftentimes I hear terms like aliens. I'm like, okay, so if we use that term alien, does that mean less than human? So does that mean that their rights aren't the same? When we talk about immigrants, when we talk about, and actually I want to bring to your attention, and you probably know this, not so long ago, women, because we were considered the weaker sex, were questioned as to whether or not we had rights as human beings, even though we were raising human beings. So much so that at one point in time, women were not considered to have a soul. Along came women's rights, women's suffrage. And guess what? They found out we were human, and that we were entitled to the rights to vote, to choose our occupation, to own property. Alhamdulillah. You'll hear me say that a lot too. That means praise be to God that He gives us some kind of guidance and direction. Okay? There was also a time, not too long ago, that because of our terminology that we used to classify different people who were human beings, we transported, we called it the diaspora, a multitude, a mass of people here to do free labor. And to justify the action, and I know you know what I'm talking about, slavery. To justify the action, we said that the men were 3/5 of a man. Now, I don't know how you come up with that, but we have progressed since then. We won't even talk about this 3/5 of a man's family or his wife who didn't have a soul, okay? So in our efforts to become more aware of our human rights, we must not forget the information and what history has taught us, because we're still there. But we must not give up. Why? Because we have seen some changes and some differences. Once we understand that there are some human rights that we are entitled to, I call them God-given. You may call them something else. You may call them laws of nature. But we do agree upon them. And we're finding that we're having to make more and more laws. This isn't the first time. If we were to go back in history, back further and further, you will see that there's always been a struggle to establish our human rights. If we look nowadays, what are we looking for? We're looking at people who have lost their homes, their jobs. They want the right to live, the right to have a home, the right to have good education, the right to have medical. Sound familiar? We see people protesting. We see people angry. We see people upset. Why? Because their human rights, as we know it, have been violated. We don't need to make any more laws, actually. We just need to enact the laws that we have. I'll give you an example. I have a story for you, because I think this is really important. I was working at that time as a sales clerk, and I usually am dressed like this except when I'm home and enjoying my family. A man came up to the cash register and he thought, okay, how are you today? And I said, I'm fine, thank you. Did you purchase everything that you wanted? He said, yes. And I said, okay, is there anything else? He said, I want you to know something. You're here in America, and you don't have to dress like that. You're free. You can do what you want to. And I told him, thank you so much. That's what I love about this country. He looked at me, not quite sure how I meant it. Okay, like, well, if you know this, why aren't you changing? Because I have the freedom, the choice to dress like this. I have the right, as a human being, to practice my religion. I have the right for freedom of expression, just as he did. He looked at me, and he said, you have a good day. I said, you too. He took his bag. I thought, good God, was that a teachable moment or not? Did I miss it, or did he understand? Another example, I went to get my son's instrument many years ago fixed, repaired, whatever. And when I walked in, this sales clerk told me, he said, how can I help you? I said, well, I need to get this fixed, and as soon as possible, at an economical price, and I want you to be fair with me. Sometimes I just put that out there, okay? So he looks at me and he says, okay, we'll see what we can do. Where are you from? And I said, I'm from Gary. He says, Gary, India. I've never heard of that. You know, is that near Nepal? And I told him, no, I'm from Gary. So you all won't be lost in this conversation. Gary, Indiana. I was born and raised here in the States, okay? So he said, Gary, India. Well, tell me, are your instruments a little bit different than this? And he went into a whole thing. I said, no, they're very much like this one. And what I would like to do is get it repaired. About how long do you think it would take? That was a teachable moment. But he had put in his mind, when he saw me, that she's got to be from someplace else. And for me, I'm kind of worried or concerned. Does that mean I'm less human? Does that mean I'm going to get the fair deal? Does that mean that you see me as your human being counterpart? What does that mean? These are just little stories, and I'm certain that we all have our stories to tell. But my favorite one is this. I'd gone out of the country with my husband, and we were in a store. And this lady came back from a different country and said, how much is this dress? And she pointed to a particular dress, so she had been looking, okay? She looked for this dress, and she says, how much is it? And she raised it up. And he said, oh, it's $45. She said, you told my friend it was $35. He said, no, it's $45. And so he said, where are you from? She says, Oh, now I don't want you to be scared, so you can ask people where they're from. I'm just giving you some stories, okay? So she says, I'm from, and she stopped. She said, where are you from? He says, oh, I'm from Pakistan. She says, oh, that's where I'm from. Now, how much is the dress? He laughed. We all laughed. Guess how much the dress was? $35. Got it. Okay, going back to human rights. I have the right to fair trade. You have the right to fair trade. All of these laws are already, and they were written even before now. We can go back as far as the Code of Hammurabi. That was about 1800 years ago, before Christ. We have the Hindu Vedas. We have the Torah. We have the Ten Commandments. We have the Bible. We have the Quran. We have the sayings of Confucius. We also have historical or documentation of the Incas and the Aztec, codes of conduct and justice. The Iroquois also had a constitution. The Native American had sources addressing people's duties, rights, and responsibilities. In our efforts to identify ourselves, sometimes we can get away from what is our human right. Is my human right the same as your human right? And why shouldn't it be if we have agreed that we are humans? Where does your right begin and where does mine end? Does it have to? Our actions are judged by our intentions. Every person is accountable according to their intention. What is your intent? What are you trying to get at? There's another thought. A right is only as valid as it is legitimate and not harmful to others. A neighbor builds a fence. A corporation builds a building that blocks out the water, the sun. What are the intentions? What are the effects on the neighbor? What are their rights? Our rights should prevent and protect from damage. The lesser for the greater. The greater good. Does that sound familiar? Often we find ourselves refining, reconditioning, remaking the words for our convenience. What are our human rights? I have here our Bill of Rights that more and more people are referring to. If you get a chance, pick it up. Just see what we have already said about our human rights. And I want to share something with you that I think really sums it up. And this comes from the Quran. And there are so many other verses, chapters, surahs, ayats from the Quran that simply fit mean human rights. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Don't get excited. In the name of God. Okay? The merciful. Oh, humanity. We created you from a male and a female and made you into peoples and tribes so that you might come to know each other. The noblest among you in Allah's sight is the one, Allah God, sight is the one who guards against evil. The one who's most mindful of Allah, taqwa. The all-knowing, the all-aware. And O children of Adam. All children of Adam. We have set down clothing to you to conceal your private parts as well as fine apparel. But the garment of heedfulness, that is best. This is the one Allah signs so that hopefully you will pay heed. Pay heed to what? What are we paying heed to? We're paying heed to how we treat one another, what our human rights are. It brings us together. Oh, humanity, male and female, everyone. I've made you into tribes and peoples. Why? So we all don't look alike. So I know you from me. You know me from you. Is that a bad thing? Of course not. It doesn't matter if you think it is. Because guess what? We have tribes of people in existence whether we want them there or not. And we're closer than we think. In so many things that we want. Worldwide, we see people fighting for their rights. Many people are overwhelmed by this. Well, what can I do? That's going to be our discussion after this. What can we do? I'm just one person. I'll tell you what one person did not too long ago. We were invited to go to a church. The woman said she read an article about jihad. She had the notion that, oh my God, are Muslims really like this? I don't believe so. When you talk about the millions of Muslims in America, okay? And the stereotype that is given with us, about us, because many times people think that if I paint you the villain, you're less than human. If I make you a terrorist, then you're bad, not necessarily a person. You're less than human. No. People struggling for their rights, their human rights. And there are those of us, singularly and collectively, who work and fight for those rights as well. So there's something everyone can do. Getting back to this lady, she invited us to her church. We spoke. She invited a number of churches to come together with us. We made a presentation. We were like, my goodness. Well, we never had any idea. We just heard of terrorist jihad. We talked about the rights of women. And we do have rights. I'm up here now before you, letting you know we do have rights, human rights. Although they had thought to the contrary. They had no idea. But we are all struggling for human rights in different ways. And then, of course, we have those struggling for power and control. What can I do? She made one effort, and I imagine there were about 100 people who came. She did what she could. There was a lady, I guess many years ago, who organized a new mothers or fathers or males or females may be familiar with MAD. Her daughter had been a hit-and-run victim. She was so distraught because they never found, to my knowledge, who did it. But she organized the MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. One person. So we can't always look for governmental assistance. It would be nice. We have to look to each other. I want you to know me. I want you to know us. And we want to know you. We want to share our human rights. And that's why I'm able to be here in front of you. And that's why you have allowed me to be there. And that's why I'm able to express to you. And you're such an attentive audience. I want to share a few things that the Bill of Rights has said. I already quoted you from the Quran, which sums it up nicely and shortly and briefly and concisely, because this is the Word of God, the Word of Allah. But the Bill of Rights says, okay, Congress shall make no laws in respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech. Basically what it means is government can neither impose a state religion on you, nor punish you for exercising the religion of your choice. How about that? Because we don't need to rewrite that one, do we? No. Amendment 2. A lot of people quote this one. The right to bear arms. to own and use weapons. Number 3, you cannot be forced to house government agents. 4, the right of the people to secure in their person, homes, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches, seizures, but upon probable cause. Recently, I think a bill was signed, this NDAA, which now says we can be encroached upon by officers, military, and they can pretty much arrest us, detain us, for as long as they like. On the same hand, years ago, and we're still now, there's those who are fighting to close down Guantanamo Bay, because you have a lot of people there who have been there for years, that we are housing, that we are paying for, that have not been charged. If we do not defend our human rights, do not understand our human rights in comparison to the collective whole, the collective good, then look what happens. A bill is placed in effect, says the same thing can happen to us. There are so many issues, so many things taking place where people are rebelling against their human rights, not being respected as a human being. I do this. And Allah has said, "O people, O humanity, I created you. The best among you is not the one with the most money or of a particular status or race, but the one who is most mindful of me and my creation." Now, I'm not familiar with the biblical terms used, but I'm certain in the Bible and in the Torah and whatever book you read that brings you peace or comfort has something like that in it. Globally, the champions of human rights have been primarily citizens, not government officials, and every day the government may violate the rights of others, and it is challenged by different organizations. So you say, well, I'm not into the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, you know, okay, I get it. I want my rights. There are different organizations that are fighting for the rights of us to come together, to enjoy life. Life, liberty, and the what? Pursuit of happiness. Who doesn't want that? Now we can't use the rule of, okay, want for my brother what he wants for me or my sister, because we don't always want the same thing. And not all of us can be very nice. And we know that. Well, in closing, I want to mention this to you. It's not hopeless. We are not at the station yet. And if you understand what I mean by that, is that we're taking a train to get to a destination, and we're not there yet. It's okay. Because it's ongoing. Everyone has a way to contribute. We must understand when we use such terms as savages, barbarians, it's our way to describe a situation, but does that mean that we do not consider the human rights of others? Why do I say that? Because otherwise, if we don't have a sense of who we are and what our obligation is, then our right can become, like it has in many instances, convenient. Well, it's convenient for me to quote the Bible or the Torah or something, or any book, and mislead or misrepresent. But when we speak of the whole of humanity, it starts with us as a human being. Humans. Humans, what? Humans what? What are we? Human, come on, come on. Tell me you're awake. I haven't lulled you to sleep, have I? I hope not. Please. Human what? Beings. We're human beings. We're not human sitting. We're human beings. We're about being. We're about doing. We're about doing the work of making sure that we not only understand our human rights, but we reflect them. And that in our reflection, we also understand that others are human beings and they have their rights. Whether you know it or not, whether we accept it or not, we have more in common than we have differences. And guess what? What we see today, what we see going on worldwide, is an abuse of human rights. Our rights. May we be fortunate enough to be blessed with an understanding and an awareness that we can do something. Even with those different stories I told you about my own interactions with human beings, it might be more convenient sometimes to call them aliens because you just don't want to deal with it. You're like, my God, what is this? What are they coming from? So they've got to be an alien. No. They're human like us. It's based on our understanding. And once again, this is why I applaud you in allowing us to come to talk to you about different subjects and to dispel the different things that people may think of human beings in different parts of the world and right here. You should see sometimes when I go to the airport, when I come in, I will see someone smiling. Just casually, believe it or not, people still smile. And they look. And then they see me and they immediately go into, do you mind having a search over here? They're trying to be as polite as they can. I mean, their whole demeanor changes. You're talking about body language. It's like, okay, and I'm used to that. So generally, what is my response? Because, okay, I'm from Gary, Indiana. For those of you who don't know, it's not too far from Chicago. So when I see them, I'm like, how you doing today? I'm fine. Yes, I would like to be checked privately. Oh, all right. We have a lady over here. Thanks. She's coming, poor thing. Absolutely, even though it's her job, very uneasy. I can see it. Why? Because I go to airports and I get this all the time. So I'm more casual with it. But what about the people who aren't, okay? It's your right, my right to feel safe. But where does my right begin and yours end? That's another question people are always asking. So what happens is when the lady comes and says, do you mind if I check your headgear? Well, it's now gear. It's no longer a headscarf. It's gear. I'm cool. I understand. I understand that she's doing the best she can to figure out what to call this thing. It's a scarf. We call it different names. It's a jab. I never thought of it as a headgear, but maybe she thought I had something hiding up under here. Okay? So I'm standing, ready, poised. I'll tell you, I could be a security guard. Okay? This foot in front, stop. This foot in front. Okay, would you turn around? Yes. Okay. You have a good day. I hope everything is good for you. This is me saying that. Oh, you too. You too. And I'm like, okay. So as I get ready to get on the plane, and I'm sitting there in the chair, the person next to me looks over. So at that time, I'm tired. I just want to get on the plane. I just want to go home. It's not a teachable moment for me back then. I'm looking at them like, okay, move as far down as you want. I'm not moving. I'm tired. I don't have any weapons. I'm just trying to get home. I don't have anything that is harmful to you. And believe it or not, many of us go through that. I'm sharing that story because many of you may not. You might feel safe and secure. Do I feel safe and secure? Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And sometimes I'm like, what is this? Part of that is our understanding of each other as human beings. We want the same things. I want to be safe. I don't want to be on a plane that might get blown up. I understand that. I have loved ones. But when you look at me and when you see people who are different from us, and I have to quote Michael Moore in this when he said xenophobic. We get scared when we see somebody. It's unfamiliar grounds. So we get scared and it's xenophobic. We're afraid of anybody who doesn't look like us. But what did the Quran say? The Quran tells us that we are made into what? What? Please somebody tell me besides a Muslim. The rest of the audience, come on, you've been listening. I know you've been sitting there because you didn't move. What did the Quran say about that? It says that God created us in what? What? Peoples and what else? Yes. He could have made us all look alike. What a boring world. But he didn't. And that's for us to what? Know each other. How do we get to know each other? By understanding our humanness, our human rights, pushing for what is right and good. We can do that. We can do that independently. We can do that collectively. It is doable. I want you to know that when I look at everyone out here, even if I don't get what I think I need, for me, in my mind, we're still creation of God. We're still God's children. We still come from Allah. We still are sons and daughters of Adam. And as God's people, my understanding is that you have the right. And I have the right. And these rights do not conflict as long as we're striving not to harm, hurt each other. We can do things out of ignorance. That's where your intention comes in. We can be very ignorant, like, okay, like I told you when the poor guy was asking me, he was really trying to be nice when he asked me where was I from, and I told him Gary, Indiana, and he said, oh, Gary, India. He didn't know. I understood that. That's why I decided I wouldn't carry on the conversation too much longer because it was too much that I would need to share with him. I just wanted the instrument fixed. That's all. So I hope with this talk, like I told you in conclusion, that you do have a different view, a different understanding, and that we work together in our humanness to fight, to struggle for our human rights, and to remember that most of us want the same things. We want a family. We want a good life. We want education. We want medical. We want good health. We want access to these things. We want the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And in closing, I have this joke to tell you. Actually, it's not a joke. It's part of my life. I guess it was funny. I used to drive buses years ago. And there was this thing we had to take every time. It's like a form. Yes, I've done a little this and a little that. And what it was a harness. I drove buses for the little yellow buses, you know, the ones that children hide down inside. They don't want anybody to see if they understand that they're in this little yellow bus. But anyway, they had what we call harnesses for those who weren't able to sit correctly or upright, or that would have a problem or challenge of sitting still on the bus. So we used to call them harnesses. Then we decided, not we, but as a whole, in our effort to make things correct, we decided we'd call them reins. Then from the reins, we decided to call them SSS. Okay. What happened was, when I go to a parent's house, I said, does your child need the harnesses? They decided, don't use that because they're not horses. Okay. Then we used the term reins, and they were saying, well, like, that sounds like a prisoner or too restrictive. Okay? So then after that, after the reins, we changed it to SSS. It's not a movie. It stands for Special Support System. So our new terminology was Special Support System. So I go to the home, some of the parents, and I said, well, does your child need an SSS? They said, is that the harness? I said, yes. Yes, my child needs one. And the other child, his mother may not say so, but he needs one too. Well, I can't do that. I have to talk to his mom or his dad to get permission. Now guess what? We went through all of those changes to get the right terminology that the people still didn't know what we were talking about until we explained something that they could relate to. And then I had them on buses that are fueled with propane. I just said, what does that mean? That's one of the most combustible fuels you can put in a bus. So I'm strapping you in to make sure you're safe with this harness, with this rein, with this SSS, and we're driving around with propane. So what is the gist of this? The gist of it is that we not be distracted by some other things and miss the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that we must work together. We must, for our human rights, which are a safeguard for all of us. I love you for the sake of God, because you are my brother and sister, whether we in faith, but in our human family, in our humanness. I have hope that we're going to get it together. We're still trying to get on that train, get to the destination, and then stop. But it doesn't stop. It's ongoing. And it's each of our responsibilities. May Allah bless you, guide your affairs are right and mine as well. And for my beloved community, I want to say that I am most thankful. And may God guide our affairs are right. Bless us to keep conscious of what our responsibilities are. And there is no work so hard, so big, that we can't do it together. And I want to thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to talk to you so that we can get to know each other better in our struggle for our human rights. Thank you.
I think a large part of how we perceive the Islamic world and women's rights is how the press portrays women in, for example, Saudi Arabia. Could you address whether that's a stereotype or whether that's real, and that in Israel, what efforts are being made globally to try to give women more rights as you have here in the United States?
I think that's a very good question. I am not a scholar or someone who could speak in depth to that because I don't live in Saudi Arabia, nor have I. I have visited that area for Hajj, which is our religious rite. I am at this point going to say that rights are being made worldwide for women's rights, period, in all different countries. And in Saudi Arabia, with not being an exclusion, an exception, we also have women's rights here, just trying to get the same amount of pay for the same amount of work. Also in South America, same all over. But I would begin with this in saying that it's my understanding that recently the women of Saudi Arabia have been allowed to drive. Now, I guess you say, well, good gracious. And I could be incorrect with that, so I want to ask my Muslim brothers and counterparts here, because we do have resources besides myself. And I want you to know something. For some of us, you might think, oh my gosh, to drive, what is this? Okay, for many of us who do drive, we wish somebody would drive us around. We get tired of driving, seriously. But anyway, to address that question, I would not be the person to ask specifically, because I haven't lived there. I have friends there, and we always flip the, that's slang. I was about to say flip the script. In America, in Saudi. So are there any brothers or sisters here who would like to comment? Brother Washti, could you give us any comment on that? Or Brother, as far as the events, and please feel free to come up here.
Again, I'm not a scholar.
That's safe.
My previous work, we realized that there are about 56 countries which are predominantly Muslim. And the whole spectrum there when it comes to human rights or women's rights. Yes, there might be countries where people or women can't even drive or vote or whatever. But then there are countries where women can be prime ministers. So these are all Muslim countries that we're talking about. I think a good example of a country like that where rights and responsibility are in very good balance would be a country like Malaysia. You know, half of the students in educational institutions are women, and they are running banks, they are running this and that. So it really depends on the cultural, background of each country. And I don't think we should just paint a broad, brush picture of the whole Islamic world, taking one country as an example.
Thank you. And I want to, yes, please.
Gentlemen, it's very important for us to understand why the stereotype is there.
Right.
A great Arab American author, his name is Jack Shaheen, S-H-A-H-E-E-N, Jack Shaheen. He wrote a book called The Real Bad Arabs, The Real R-E-E-L. And he mentioned, the 1930s, the media has been instrumental, and so to Hollywood, in projecting an enemy that can be replaced, instead of the communists for a while, and so many other enemies that we create, in our daily political and economical struggle. So yes, Saudi Arabia might be violating, certain rules according to Islamic law when it comes to women's rights, But at the same time, Saudi Arabia has progressed in so many other ways that our society has progressed in terms of the right for free education, the right for free health, the right for so many others. We remember just recently, how Hillary Clinton was running for the highest office in the United States, which is the presidency. How many people have stereotyped, women running for such an office? So, but when you look for a religion, I think we should look at the religion from a holistic understanding of that religion and what that religion or that culture has produced in the number of years according to the text, rather than looking into one particular example.
So that I think, from my point of view,
theocracy or some country that's mostly or run by Islam and all this stuff. It seems like that's different than the U.S. Islam, which is different than. It seems like this religion is vibrant and changing and different things in different regions, and but under kind of the banner of Islam. It's just from the outside looking in, it's very confusing because clearly, here you are, a very articulate woman who's talking for Islam, which is great. I'm sure that some places that couldn't happen, but it doesn't mean it's not Islam. It's confusing.
You know what? I want to make a comment, if you don't mind, for just a moment. I appreciate that comment because what we have to understand is that where we see a lot of Muslims in different countries as well, that country doesn't necessarily have to be Islamic. Okay? It can be ruled by someone who is not Islamic, but the population of people are Islamic, and then or Muslims. Then too, some of my sisters from all over the world are very articulate in their own right, and have come here with degrees from all kinds of schools of prestige. What we find here is that as Americans, we have what we take for granted is a freedom that might be more restrictive in other places. And when these sisters or brothers come here with these degrees, sometimes they are embraced, and in other times they are made to go back through the educational system to make sure that they have the right understanding of America and its system as far as education. So once again, it's maybe confusing, but if we were to look and see in our own situation here in the United States with all the freedom, we're seeing a lot of homeless, we're seeing a lot of protesting, and someone would say, well, my gosh, why is this going on in America? Because a lot of people also think that America, the streets are paved with gold, or that everything is all right here. We're struggling too. So we have to keep a balance and realize that the rights of women is still being struggled for here in the United States. It wasn't that long ago where women were allowed to keep their name. In the other countries, women kept their names. When I married someone, I kept my family name, and he kept his family name. Women have fought legally to say, look, I want to keep my name. I don't take on my husband's name. I want my own. And this was a long practice condition in Islam. Okay, excuse me.
I think what I wanted to add here is that one has to look at religion in the cultural. Just like Christianity in so many different countries, there's a religious aspect and there's a cultural aspect. And the same thing with Islam. There are 56 different countries. You have to look at local cultural context and how Islam is being practiced in that context. So I said it could be an extreme of women not being able to even drive, rather than an extreme of women being this and that happened.
Louder, please. We want to hear your comment, please.
I grew up in America as a Christian woman, and I agree with you. Listening to these lectures, I brought my son to educate him.
Oh, great.
And to see that in Islam, because I was brought up in the South and here in the U.S., and when you're a narrow view of our country and here, to be able to see that in Christianity, we have the same vast issues. We have our very conservative and our very liberal. Hopefully someone will all come together in the middle and learn to appreciate our brothers and sisters.
Right. That's right. Great, thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Yes?
The former rulers of Afghanistan, the Taliban, whom we are still fighting there, were violently repressive of human rights, particularly women's rights. Where were they coming from? What kind of Islam were they coming from?
I love that question. I have a simple answer. We have Islam, their Islam, Your lam, his lam, and her lam. Okay? None of these lams really matter except for Islam. So a lot of times when you see these things, we identify it because of the pressure as well from the media that this is Islam. No, this is their lam. And it's easy to identify it like that because then, okay, I'm going to group all of these people together who are suppressing women's rights. So I hope that answered your question. And even though I made it in a light manner, that's what happens. We can find someone in Christianity and say, or okay, look, let's use an example of the officers or the people who were found killing, just going in, bombing people's homes after the war, American soldiers. Okay? This is where we have to be careful, and here's where our humanness comes in. Does it make it right because American soldiers did it? Well, they were fighting for their country. Well, who were these other people fighting for? I remember my son coming home one time and the teacher said, well, these are rebels and these are patriots. And when my son said that, it was something going on in Africa, I said, well, what do you think about that? That comes from experience as a parent. You don't just put your opinion out there for them to disagree. You make them think that, oh, you have a choice. So he said, well, Mom, I don't really quite understand. I said, why is it that they might be rebels? Couldn't they be patriots in their own country? Do they have to be rebels? Couldn't the people that they see coming in from the United States, couldn't they be the rebels or fighting against their rights as a people? That's why it's so critical that we agree on our human rights. We've done that through the convention, Geneva Convention, from the Magna Carta, from all of these different papers that say my right to defend, to live. So we have to be careful. But it's good questions and it's food for thought and it's something that we always have to be mindful of. Will I still be right when I'm dealing with someone else? Yes.
This is why we have to be very careful because in any religion we have to judge the people that adhere to it by the prophet that brought it. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu prayer and peace of God doesn't be upon him brought Islam. He is the model of excellence that we strive to emulate or be a part of. Nancy Pelosi said something when she was the Speaker of the House. She said, how can we justify accusing 1.6 billion adherents of those who call themselves Muslims of all being terrorists? Just as how could we as Muslims classify all Christians as being terrorists for what Timothy McVeigh did? We can't judge Christianity by Timothy McVeigh, nor can we judge the Taliban by what they do in terms of what they're doing to Islam. Islam freed women 1,500 years ago. It guarantees them the right to their own name, their own business, the right to be educated. This is a right. For every Muslim father, it's an obligation upon us to educate our daughters. We look forward to doing this. So we can't judge the religion by me, because you see, I fall short of it. In my Islam is a perfected way of life. It's not even a religion. It's an organized. It's just God. But I fall short of it in my representation of it. Because I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes. So you don't look at me and think that because I say I'm a Muslim that this is the way Islam is. I may not be exemplifying it in the manner that I should according to the standards that I'm trying to spread the peace of God that we want to have been brought into us. So we judge the religion by the prophet that brought. Look at Jesus. What did he say? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be the children of God. So we look at it in that sense.
Last comment.
Yes. Oh.
It's very interesting,
Islam is Islam for us. How we look into the text is similarly how the Crusaders look into the text. How the Inquisition, the word about Christians, that in their own mind, they understood that this is how they interpret the text from their own context. Whether the Crusaders, whether the people that promoted the Inquisition, or whether recently, what's the name that in Texas Tech, David Parrish, or Jerry Jones. There are people in every single religion, they look into the text passionately according to their understanding. And this is where people of good thinking, need to create that common ground. The common ground that Islam has promoted, when a Jewish funeral was passing in Medina and the Prophet, peace be upon him, stood up. And the companions, when they saw the Prophet stood up, standing up, they stood up with him. And one of the companions, he said, "Oh, Prophet of God, it is a Jew." The Prophet told him what? He said, "Yes, it is a soul." And he didn't say it is a Jew. He said it is a soul that God has created. So the soul that has created must be dignified according to each one of us by creating that common ground. And then God, the Almighty, sent Gabriel, the Archangel Gabriel, with a new verse. He said, "Oh Muhammad, tell the people of the book, come to a common word between us and you, that we worship not except God and we create peace." That's a common word that binds me to Sister Maria as a Catholic nun, That's the bond that connects me with my dear friend Tom Bartlett, That's a bond that creates the understanding and the holy and the complete understanding of each other. It's a fine line. In my perspective as a Muslim, we're wrong in that interpretation. But they are not the only ones that went wrong into the interpretation. There are a lot of people from our society, from our military, that intentionally, their intentions were good to go and liberate Iraq, and create democracy. But 7 years, 8 years now, look how many people died in Iraq. In 30 years of Saddam Hussein ruling Iraq as a dictator, there were less atrocities, in 30 years than these 8 years since our former president, okayed the war in Iraq in 2003. More people died in Iraq. Iraq is more or less than it used to be. So it is very important for us to look into the context of every single interpretation or every single act. As much as there are rotten apples in every society, but there are a lot of good apples. And we should enjoy eating the good ones, and the more and the rotten ones we should recycle them or combust them and put them back in the ground for better fertilizer.
They're missing your joke over here. They're looking at you like, what did he say? Yes.
I have to put in a plug for a good website. Washi mentioned a common word, and there is a website called acommonword.com, and it's focused on what Christianity and Islam have in common.
Oh, great.
And it centers on a letter that was written by Islamic scholars called The Common Word Between Us and You. So if you have time, I would recommend it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Did everyone hear that?
Sister, you may drive my bus anytime. I'd prefer not to be in a harness. Except in the harness of God's Word.
That's right.
We thank you very much for your presentation today. Sisters and brothers, we thank you for being with us. Please join us next week as we conclude this series. And my hope is that in these journeys we will one day be home together. God's peace be upon you.